Okay. I think we're live.
It says live on Facebook, on the Book of Faces.
All right, I'm going to try and mute us on Facebook. Haha, there we go. Wonderful. Hello, everybody. This is a shock live. a unexpected live. I'm just going to talk for a minute while nobody's here, and then everybody will be like, what? Give everyone a minute to get in here. Come to me, children. Come to me. I don't know what the song.
Come,
how the song
little
goes.
children, I'll take thee away into what is it? Garden of Magic.
Yeah. That. Did it work?
I don't know. Oh, well, there's 3 people, and 2 of them are us. So hi, one person.
We conjured one person. How about Floof? Floof is here. That should bring
That's
everybody to running.
Floof. All right, let me bring it up so I can also see the commentary.
Okay, well, I'm just going to start then.
Yeah, please do, while I'm
up.
like sharing and everything.
Cris Ashburn joined. Hi, Cris Ashburn.
Hi. I'm in 2 places at once.
Witch talents. So today we're going to be talking about how to connect to your ancestors. Shocking as a topic as this is, I know. Sitting here with the ancestral queen, and I don't mean Daisy.
Yeah, you definitely pointed at her.
I know. Daisy.
I was over here like, fluffy bitch stole my title.
Fluffy bitch has all the titles. Yeah. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that can block you, some of the things that can get in your way, what it actually means to connect to your ancestors, what any of that means. What do we mean? We don't know. We just sit here and talk. So I'm going to bring it in. I'm really surprised that it's very, very quiet this evening, but apart from Daisy getting in a brown bag. I'm trying desperately to be serious. Okay. So, Cris, what is an ancestor, Cris?
Technically, ancestor broken down is antecedere, meaning those who've gone before, basically. And in that mindset, it's typically just anyone who is before us. Now, that's thinking of a timeline linearly, so just like go with us on that. But it does not just mean your immediate relatives. It's anyone who has gone before, period. So there are different levels of that and what that means. And for myself personally in my own practice, there are ancestors, there are the ancestors, and there's like ancestors as like the universal term. And so I think a lot of times people only think of like their immediate relatives as that. And that's definitely one of the things we'll be talking about for sure. Because that is sort of a blockage in itself sometimes. And so, yeah, when I talk about that, I don't just mean literal people. I also mean the earth itself. Not only that, but if we're coming out of the linear thinking and we're thinking about time being all timey-wimey and wibbly-wobbly, what actually is before? And in that situation, then we would be a living ancestor, which is another kind. And that also feeds into a lot of other things, at least within my practice. And a lot of what I teach in terms of mentorship too with people. So yes, an ancestor is everything.
Nice and succinct.
traditionally what people are talking about is they're talking about the spirits of loved ones that they have known, or maybe not so much loved, but either way, immediate relatives generally.
And it doesn't necessarily mean blood relatives either.
Nope.
That's something that I think is one of those blockages. And I know Cris has talked a little bit about this here and there before, about when people are adopted and they're worried that they can't connect to their ancestors because they don't know them, or because they don't want to, and they want to connect to their adopted family, and they feel like they can't because they're not blood relatives. And actually it's more about connection than it is blood.
Yeah, well, and also blood is a funny thing anyway, right? Like now that we have like DNA tests and things like that that are being pretty commonly taken, people are realizing they're a lot more connected than they thought. So even within that, if you go back far enough, like what even does that mean? But yes, traditionally in terms of that, like people do worry about, because in some instances they were given up or given over to a system so that they could then be adopted. They worry about like, well, what does that mean for their ancestors of their biological parents? And it's like, okay, well, you know, my advice usually to them are like, they don't speak for everyone. Like, and that's one of the common things, is that people think that, you know, one relative or a few relatives will speak for the whole. Do you realize how many there are? That's like sitting down for Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, and like one person speaks up and is like, you're a dick, and then you're like, this whole family thinks I'm a dick. Like, it's not that's not how that works. You know, now it does create sort of a chasm emotionally with us, and a lot of times with our practice, in terms of realizing that, you know, it's kind of like a stone in the path, but you can walk around it, or ultimately deal with it too if you would like. But it's not a gate slamming shut on all future possibilities on behalf of all ancestors. Many times when I work with people who are adopted, they end up having double the people like show up. I'm over here like, can I get like one on this side and one on this side, please? And there's like a whole flanking system, like just so a lot of times they end up with like double it.
Yeah. So one of the ways that Cris helped me particularly is because I'm estranged from my immediate blood relatives, and I have no intention of being anything but, for the most part, they have made life choices that are not compatible with my life choices. And so that is a tie that I have severed, and stand by that choice. And then I was like, I don't know what to do now. Because the standard information about ancestral work goes along the lines of, well, you need an ancestor altar, and you put the photographs of your ancestors that you know about on there, and then you know, and you talk to them, and blah blah blah. And I was like, well, firstly, I don't want to talk to the ancestors. Like, I wouldn't mind talking to my grandma, but you know, apart from that, like, and I can't get hold of any photographs. And it was this whole big thing in my head. Like, I had it in my head that it was this big thing, and it was like a wall between me and my ancestors, and actually it was a pebble. It was like
you shall not pass. And
yeah.
I was like, no, there is no Gandalf standing there, Jody.
Hi guys. Thank you for joining us. And it was really interesting because once I started doing a little work, Cris encouraged me to do a little work. And what I did is I actually took that pebble concept, and I took actual pebbles, and I intuitively drew symbols for different ancestors, just as they intuitively came through. And then I created like a plant pot with like a spiral of like going inward to meet them. And I had that out in the garden.
and then she runs back to me super excited, and she's like, I drew on these things. And I was like, that's a thing. That's a practice. Yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yes,
Yeah.
go with that intuitive pull.
And it was kind of somewhere between almost like a tombstone kind of feel, like it's almost like creating a symbolic place of honoring, quote unquote, the death of those that have gone before, depending on your timey-wimey interpretation. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yes.
And it's also kind of like a touchstone feeling, like it gave me a physical thing that no one else had to give me, that was like a touchstone to all of these different ancestors. And I actually did. Do you have the you know, the otherworld meditation on your website now, the one that I used
Otherworld.
with the heartbeat and the like?
Oh, that was the root dirt stone.
Yeah, that one.
Is that one where it's
Is
not guided? It's that's
music.
up. That's always up.
Oh, well, I totally recommend that. It's gorgeous. And it took me like straight in, and then they were like, it gives me chills, but there were hundreds of them, and it felt like hands being placed on top of hands, like around, like on the shoulders, on the back, and just letting me know that they were there, like, we are here, was a big message. And, you know, we see you. And then they actually drew Othala on my back. And at the time I was super confused, because like I was like, I'm supposed to be Celtic, like what's happening, Othala? And I couldn't remember at the time, I couldn't remember the name of the rune. And as I was coming out of the meditation, I heard Othala, like somebody said that to me on the spirit plane. And then I like double checked, and yeah, that was the right rune. And I was like, oh. So that's the Nordic rune, meaning tradition, but also heritage and family and ancestry and that sort of thing. And it turns out I'm more Scandinavian than I am English, according to my DNA. So that's like the why. But yeah, so that was how I personally started connecting to my ancestors, which is it wasn't anything that I had been taught or had seen. But Cris was a big part of it, and then it was kind of like me going off like, what can I do? Yeah, Joey Henge. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Joe Hinge. I like that. The Joey Hinge. Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty frequent thing too, is like people will commonly, when they want to start with ancestry work, they will search outside of themselves for things like so like they'll research the specific cultures, or they'll research you know, for names, or try to find photographs or stories about them. And while that's fabulous when you have it, or if you can get it, like, you know, yeah, a lot of people don't have some of those things. And the truth is that you have the best thing of all, which is essentially you, your own freaking DNA. You are literally a vortex of all of those people. You are the hub. And as the acting hub, you are able to tap into that at any point. You don't need other things. You don't need specific traditions. Like, you have them in you. So, you know, the idea of creating these sigils that are for each ancestor, that is intuitively told to you, and then sort of writing their names on stone, it's sort of reaffirming them as earth, them as foundation, them as root, them as where you come from. And it's beautiful. It's something that I have definitely heard of. I've heard people draw on rock. I've also heard people, like for me, I have tea lights that I get out at certain times of the year, because it's a lot of tea lights, y'all. And for certain things, I do lineage calling. And for those whose names I don't know to call, I light candles for and address them as, you know, the mothers, the aunts, the grandmothers, the uncles, the grandfathers, the fathers. Like, I know that they're there, you know, and I just am giving a shout out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are many ways that you can work with that. There are many things in terms of that, but one of the main ways is just intuitively. they work with us every day, and we don't realize it, honestly.
Mm-hmm. One of the energies that I have found very powerful, and I have been doing for as long as I can remember without being taught it, was honoring the forgotten dead. And I would take rose petals at Beltane and apple slices at the autumn equinox, and I would go to the local graveyard and I would take these gifts and I would lay them at the gravestones of people who their graves were unattended, weren't cared for, weren't looked after, were crumbling, and the names had gone, and maybe it looked as if they'd been forgotten. And I think that for me tied into my ancestry a little bit, because there's an easiness of forgetting that happens with human beings, and the way that we remember is through history, through stories, and sometimes we have physical mementos of that, but still you're playing out a story in your mind when you're reading their story, you're reading what's left behind, and it's not always an accurate, quote unquote, portrayal of who they are or who they were in their entirety. And so there is this feeling of those that can be forgotten, those that can be lost, parts of people that can be lost. And I don't think enough attention is often drawn to that can be built from what Cris already said, that you are already that nexus. So there is nothing to say that you cannot reach out into the spirit world and connect to them and learn things about them that you have no way of knowing. And you can just trust your intuition, your own abilities when connecting with spiritual ancestors.
And furthermore, that you can be specific if you want to. If there is someone that you specifically don't wish to speak to, then don't speak to them.
Yeah. Although we've both found that if somebody is a inappropriate ancestor candidate for whatever reason, there tends to be like a they don't get to come through thing that happens.
Yeah. Just imagine all the grannies get together and just shouldering people out. That's kind of what goes down.
Well, the head of my ancestor table, who by the way started coming through in a tarot reading I had with Arwen, she just showed up, is a Scottish Pict. Yeah, if she doesn't want anyone getting through, they're not getting through. So I get chills thinking about it. So I honestly feel like the majority of your ancestors are there to protect you and help you on your spiritual journey because they're invested in you. You're the continuation of the line of them, Well,
it's like I was, so my father passed several years ago, for those who don't know. And my mother asked me, would you like some of his ashes to keep? And I was like, why? Because no disrespect to anybody who is keeping that. If that's what you want to do it. But for me, my retort was kind of like, I'm better than his ashes. Like I'm him. Like I am his blood, his DNA, his whatever. But like I am a link in the chain as a result of that. So, for me, like where ashes have burned and sort of stopped there, if you will, like I continue on. And that's sort of there's the fact that like we're the continuation and the responsibility to celebrate, which I talked about recently on my Patreon, in terms of being a living ancestor, but also the responsibility to remember and connect and carry forward.
Yeah.
And tap into that.
Yeah, I was going to say that kind of the living memory of who they were, and then passing that memory on, passing the stories on, becoming a link in the storytelling chain, I think is important.
A lot of people that you meet when they've had people pass, they oftentimes, like people as a whole, are usually hesitant in like talking about that person or like having that person talk about them. like people are hesitant to bring up my father, for instance, sometimes with me, and I'm like, no, like please do, because that gives me another chance to tell who he is, to continue on, to carry him forward. So it's not just literally DNA, even it's, you know, I have people now like Joey had never met him while he was alive. And she knows his personality now. She knows stories about him. She knows things, you know, about that, you know, is now continued on through her as well. And I know things about her picked ancestor. You know what I mean? So together there is this sort of net of like pulsing energy that carries on.
And then there's the kind of, by living, they carry on living through you. So that there's a lot of memory in it for me. But whenever we talk about ancestor, the idea of memory is really prevalent for me, because you're creating memories at every given point. And it feels to me like that almost kind of feeds ancestors in a way, because by creating new memories, they are experiencing a world which they are not tangibly a part of at that point. Maybe they haven't chosen to experience it. Maybe they are. It's a difficult one, because it's like, are they existing in several points in time? Are they tangibly feeling several points in time? I tend to believe so, but I feel like that there may be a picking and choosing of which eras people go into, and maybe that the ones that they don't decide to live tangibly in, they then experience through the line, the connection. And so our experiences feed the collective, or that's very Borg, we feed the collective.
It is, but it kind of goes into that mode a little bit. Like when you work in ancestor work, like the Borg kind of conversations start happening to some degree.
We just end up at the Borg. We don't know why.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean that everything is hunky-dory. It doesn't mean that because you are part of that, like they have control over you. It does not mean that things that have happened in your past or you being a result of them means that you have to be them. There's a difference between remembering and like living for someone else and like living your own life and carrying them with you, if that makes sense. And I think that that's an important division to mark, because I think a lot of people may feel pressure also from that to think that they have to be them, or that in being a result of them or a product of them, that they then have that in them somehow, if perhaps it's an ancestor that they see as sort of tainted, or, you know, that kind of thing. So it's important also to note that in being, you know, responsible to celebrate, responsible to do all that, you also have the responsibility in terms of ancestral healing, and in terms of saying, you know, nope, the buck stops here. I've seen that meme going around. In terms of saying, you know what, no, we will carry this forward, but maybe not that.
Yeah. There's still choice.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Choice. The choice is, they lived, they made their choices, and you live and you make your choices, and you can't make choices for anyone else. As much as you might wish you could, you can't. So that's very Earth sign. As much as you might wish you could, sometimes you can't.
Yes. Yeah. And I know, Joey, you mentioned how you got into working with your ancestors. I'd like to also talk about me in terms of getting into that too. Because I know we're on your Starry Eyed Supplies page broadcasting right now, and so I'm sure there's people who are like, who the hell are you?
How does anyone not know who you are if they follow me? Where have you been?
But so I am a medium, and I am a priestess, an ancestral priestess, and I grew up with you know, shadows over my bed and talking to people couldn't see, and picking up on things and feeling things and just knowing shit. And I'm hereditary pagan, and my mother would have drummings all the time. And the drummings for every full moon and new moon were often to connect with the ancestors, like to commune with them. And we would have other people also come to our home and host those. And so a lot of my stuff comes from sitting in sacred space and connecting heartbeats with them, and remembering through that. So that's another thing too, if you're trying to find them, if you're trying to remember them. And that's why, Joey, the drums hit you so hard on that meditation that I have up, is because the drum, the heartbeat, is old, and it symbolizes their heartbeat as well. And there's something about that syncing everything up. But yeah, so for me, it was just kind of around. Like, I started talking to them before I knew that's what I was doing, to the extent that, like, as I got into my 20s and stuff, I had to kind of come to terms with, like, no, I'm doing ancestral work. Because they were just part of the practice. They were just the foundation, because they're a foundation, the roots. Yeah, so that's my background. That's how I got there. And for me, I didn't know that there was a block for the majority of it. I think there was an issue in terms of some of my native lines, because many of them were not open about it. I'm from Virginia originally, and lots of them fled and tried to disappear and not be noticed. And so as a result, there's a very spotty history there in terms of connecting. And I lived for a long time thinking of how much knowledge was lost in not passing things on there. And then one day I was at a sacred fire with a fire keeper, and I watched all of these ancestors circle the fire, shoulder to shoulder. Like, we're talking like so far in deep that it was like a mountain effect, where you have, like, you know, the main mountain, and then like the gray, and then lighter gray, and until it just
that's
disappears.
how they showed up to me too.
Yeah, and just all shoulder to shoulder. And then I felt one of the grandmothers, the specific one that I'm talking about in terms of someone who had a ton of knowledge, her hand on my shoulder. And I realized, oh, wait a minute. That's not lost. I literally have her able to talk to her, ask her questions. Like, it goes both ways. It's not just a conversation as it comes up. You can literally ask them and they will answer.
Yeah.
But you have to listen instead of try to listen, if that makes sense.
Well, there's a trust, because I think a lot of people, when the way that I hear is almost like it's like a memory in the back of the mind, but it's not a memory. So, you know, when this is how I explain it to people, you know, when you recall a memory, and say you recall a memory and you're talking to somebody about something, and you can hear it in your head, like as if you were still talking to them. You're not, it's a memory, but your brain is making it real in the background, right? Well, when spirits talk, that's kind of what happens, only that's not a memory of this lifetime. And they get sassy, which is the way of knowing that this spirit is.
I like to call it drive-by thoughts, because of course I do. It's kind of like, you're like, doing this thing over here, and it's like, hey, what if this happened? And you're like, why the fuck did I? Oh. A lot of that happens.
Yeah, so Chris has asked, how do you learn to tell the difference between an actual communication from other versus your own mind playing tricks on you? I'm having a few troubled experiences. I'm going to suggest that your mind doesn't play tricks on you. That idea is a block in itself. Why would your mind play tricks on you? I think the idea of your mind tricking you is one of those conditioned responses, like, you know, when little kids talk to spirits freely and they just trust and believe, and the adult's like, oh, it's just your mind playing tricks or whatever.
I would also interject too that there's a difference between like the mode that your mind is in when you're making something up, right? Like if you're playing pretend about something and that feeling versus like things happening and that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very different feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
One is like more output oriented and the other is like, do going about my business. What the fuck? Okay. That latter one, that's it.
Yeah. There's also a very interesting, I find that people who do hear spirits, they have several moments of pure confirmation, and it's terrifying because you usually are called to put yourself out there. I had one recently where a spirit was talking for somebody else who was feeling very, very blocked, and they gave me a name, and I am like always super 100% hesitant to say any names because that's immediately like, if this is someone they really don't know, or if I'm putting myself out there to look like a crazy person, basically. That's the worry, right? And I told her, and she was her great grandmother, and I was like like relief almost. And so there's definitely moments of confirmation that do happen,
and there's moments of trust in that, right? Like because okay, so sometimes with mediumship and stuff, I will have someone describe like their land. I've had that happen where they described the land that they lived on. Like they showed me like kind of still shot frames of like the property. Like, here's a giant tractor. Here's a tree line with these kinds of trees. Here's this porch. It's shaped like this. And I'm like, what is this? What are you doing? And I'm describing it. And the person's like, that my house doesn't look like that. And I'm like, I did not say that was your house. Hold on. Let me ride this train until they stop at the station. Like, and so I'm describing it. And then finally I get to, sort of this man sitting in the chair and like gestures and like personality types. And then I realized like, oh, okay, this is not your land. This is their land. Whose land looked like this? Mm-hmm. And then she instantly was like, whoa, I know exactly who that is. I haven't been there for ages and, that kind of thing. So it's also frequent that like, that little like, what the fuck? It's gonna be like that. Like, you're gonna be like, that doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't make sense to you. You're not them.
It's not yours.
You don't know them. or like you don't, maybe with an ancestor, like you don't know the thing they're trying to tell you about necessarily right off the bat. Well, of course not, because you weren't them. But you can ask them to help you with it.
Where it's like, why are you gonna be so cryptic? That
yes, but they do. Dead folks, why y'all gotta be so cryptic? Because they do.
Mm-hmm. I think they enjoy it. I think that's one of the benefits of being dead, like being cryptic to the living.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that there is a difference in the feel, and I also think that there is such a fear of like being crazy amongst the spiritual community. I think that does mental illness happen? Absolutely. And I think that everyone should be checked out. And like when I work with people, I already tell them like, look, if we're going to work together and I know that you have stuff like that, like, or it dips into that, like, this is my line. I would need you to work with a professional in terms of that to also work beside you. I am not a replacement. But at the same time, I think that there's a vast difference between like, I think I'm crazy and like legitimate mental illness where you are really having trouble like finding an anchor and like sort of finding a center in that.
And we should probably say there is a massive sliding scale with mental illness as well. From there's anxieties under the umbrella of mental illness, depressions, and depression too has a sliding scale. So I think what people are really worried about is like the schizophrenic, seeing,
but also on top of
visions and things that aren't there.
Also on top of that, I would say too that the anxiety element of things too. It's sort of like that imposter syndrome thing that you and I have talked about in the past, Joey, where it's like, if you're worrying about doing that, then like chances are you probably aren't.
Yeah.
Like if you have enough,
if you're questioning if you're mad, you're probably okay.
Thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, I'm sure people will let you know that are close to you if you are. But
if you need some help.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And it's one of those things. And if you're sort of, you know, I woke up and I saw something weird in my bedroom and, you know, that's strange. And then it was gone. Like, that's not always the same level as like the paranoid schizophrenic thing that people are thinking of. And even that has been brought to such an extreme in a lot of cases that people only look at those cases. They don't look at the fact that people can live with this every day. And there are different scales, like Joey said, within that. And that is something aside from your spiritual practice. And can they intertwine? Of course, because people are people and people do all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and that's, you know, ancestry too, in a way.
Yeah. And genuinely, if that is something that you're truly that worried about, go ahead and check that out. Find out.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a difference. There is other personality traits and things like that come up in that.
One good probably litmus test for this though is if you are working with your ancestors, that should be a beneficial experience.
Absolutely.
It should be something that is giving something rich, enriching your life. That should be a source of comfort, a source of help, a source of love and support. If it's becoming something other than that, if it's becoming like a distraction or a drain or like or something problematic in some way, it's causing like ill feeling, whatever it is, that's shouldn't be ancestors at all. That's never been my experience of actual ancestors. And
usually with ancestral work, even when it's deep work, you leave feeling like you've visited home for a little while, if you get what I mean by that. Like it's sort of this like exhale thing, you know, and like a renewed sense of vitality, of confidence, of love and being seen and heard.
So if it's anything other than that, stop. If you need to get checked out, get checked out. If it is spirit-based, cleanse, ground, protection, which is not a bad port of call even with ancestry work, because your ancestors don't need protecting from. So as long as you're protected, then only ancestors are going to be walking on it. So how do you recommend connecting authentically with them?
Well, I find it interesting that you use the word authentically. I would just say, I mean, you connect with yourself and you ask. Like it's,
I was going to say,
pretty,
sure, because you are.
I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's basically like get in touch with your heartbeat, get in touch with, you know, your center up and ground, and then just be open, ask them. Those little passing thoughts that I talked about earlier, where you're like, what the fuck? You know, they don't have to be like, there's a man on a chair, he's holding a cigarette. They could also be like, put some more rosemary in that.
They're more often like that than anything else.
Hey, grab that goldenrod. Hey, yeah. Give me more. That's plenty. You don't need all that. Like those things in the back, that's also them.
They're more often like that than anything else. It's like, I sometimes am like bothered by something. I can't remember the name. I can't remember the circumstance, and I'll suddenly hear a voice that is not me.
Boom.
Remind me, like, boom. And we did talk a little bit earlier. We talked all about that, guys, about how we began, both of us, in ancestral work. So if you want to go back over the video towards the beginning, once we're done, then this will be up on the Facebook and YouTube.
In short, I will say, in terms of how do you do it, I sit in space and I listen. I listen to listen, not listen to get an answer, if that makes sense.
Open. Just be open. Yeah. More salt, please.
Yes, very much so. More salt. No, Lisa knows because Lisa has done several years of mentorship with me. And she tells people all the time, yeah, we worked on ancestry together as well. So it's funny, even when like a lot of my mentorships and stuff start out as something else, they end up being like, and now you're talking to spirits.
That's a massive part of both mine and your witchcraft, though. Mine's slightly different to Chris's. Chris's is very ancestral based, whereas I've always seen spirits. Like, that's the first thing that happened to me as a kid. That's the first gift that turned up, was the clairvoyance. But I also connect very deeply to plant spirits and animal spirits in a very profound way too. So for me, it's all the spirits. But that then feeds into Chris's, everything is an ancestor.
Yup.
Vibe.
Which, yeah, and animals were a big part of my own practice growing up too. I think that's one of the first ways that I learned to sort of divine life is watching animals. There was a big influence there in terms of that. And then when I got older, I was like, oh yeah, I guess it does apply to like plants and stuff too. That makes sense. Yeah. So, like
that's how I would see animal spirits a lot easier. Well, oh no, let's put it, I didn't see them easier. I was more comfortable with animal spirits than I was with human spirits. So I didn't mind seeing the cats running around in the house that had died and came back. I didn't mind the fact that I had one black cat called Guinness, and he got run over and I was devastated. And I remember feeling one night when I went to bed, what he used to do, he found it hilarious because he was a black cat with green eyes. So it used to freak me out because there'd suddenly be this pair of green eyes like floating through the darkness. And then I'd be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then meow on the bed. And I'd be like, oh, goodness. And he used to do this to me all the time. So you'd think I'd get wise to it. No. And I remember very vividly after he died, and I was beside myself, and my mother, being who she was, wouldn't let me mourn him properly. And he came back, and he came back on the bed the exact same way.
Wait a minute. Are you saying the cat came back? Was it the very next day?
Came back, yeah.
I thought it was Ivana, but the cat came back. All right.
Yep. And he climbed up on the bed and did the pad paws and I heard the little meow, and he curled up at my feet the same way, and he was home and crying. Oh gosh, animals get right to me. Gosh, they're such sweethearts. And sometimes I'll still feel him. Sometimes he will still show up. I was talking to Victoria about this yesterday. She's like, how do you know it's not a fox? I was like, because the foxes bounce. The fox spirit's like, boink, boink, boink. And the cats are more pad, 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 pad. So yeah, it can happen with animal spirits too.
Yeah. Lori said, I don't even hear them, I think. It's more knowing, maybe, or feeling. So that is the form of healing. A lot of people, when people say they hear them, that's what they mean. It's not necessarily always like a, like a disembodied voice, like literally a sound. Sometimes it is for people, and I have had that happen, but most of the time it's sort of
like a memory.
It's hearing them, like Joy said, almost like a memory. It's hearing them like a how you would remember how someone's voice, or even your own voice, sounded in your head, but it's like in the back. You know what I mean? I don't know how to say it. Like if you're focusing here and there's something back here, like that thing.
And a signal.
This thing. And it doesn't have to be a literal sound. And not only that, some people work with them in different ways and have different strengths and different clairs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there is no right or wrong answers with any of this, by the way. Like, there is no one way to connect to your ancestors. No way is more preferable. It's just how you connect.
It's like everybody trying to get the same channel when you've got all these options for channels, and different channels offer different things on the TV, right? So, yes, it's very much sort of like a thought, but it's one of those that's sort of passing through the backside of your brain, and you're like, what? Oh, hey. And it's more about, that's why I say listening is so important, because it's more about like plucking that out when it goes by and being like, this thing, because the biggest part of it is just acting on it, is saying, hey, I found this thing, instead of like, oh, that was weird, or huh, why did I think that? Or that was kind of creepy, or that's, whoa, all right. Like, instead of reacting that way, it's, hey, I found this. Anybody? No? Yes? Meh? Like auction off
Come to
this
the
random
table.
thought.
There's
Like,
a bowl with your
$5,
name on it.
$6, $10, anybody. I got a man in a green shirt, anybody. So
That's how you should sell your ancestor courses from now on, like that. You should have like a hat and everything.
Yeah, but it's very much this thought thing exactly that happens, but it's not something that you were actively focusing on.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times you see it, and some people see it, but some people see it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, right now you're envisioning a white pony with a black mane.
Mm-hmm.
You see that. You also see me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Two different things.
Fear is a thing. So fear is learning to trust that your ancestors have your back. And we said earlier, again, there's a good part of the video where it talks about, like, if something is draining and making you feel uncomfortable, that's not ancestors. So quite often when people are really lost, I'm like, just call in your ancestors, call in the ancestral line, ask them to stand all around you and protect you. And you can, it sounds simplistic, but it kind of is, but it's so effective.
It's simple but powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're on about an hour, and Cris had about an hour. So we're going to round off by letting you guys know that we're actually doing something joint product-wise around ancestry.
'Tis the season.
On a limited basis.
I mean, it's always the season, but 'tis the season.
So I'm going to be selling ancestral pendants. And these are basically like handmade focal points if you do not know your ancestors, or you want to connect with ancestors that you do not know. So they are handmade little pendants. I will get close to the camera in a minute, like this, and extra crispy season.
Yes.
Lisa. And each of them has a kind of Victoriana or slightly old worldy picture feel, and they have hand pressed forget-me-nots in the pendants themselves. So forget-me-nots are a flower of remembrance. The clue is in the name. So if there's a feeling of, I don't know who they are, I can't connect to them, I've forgotten, I feel like the memory is not being carried forward, these basically provide little focal points. I'm going to try and get the camera to zoom in. Yeah. So there's this very surly woman in a bonnet, and I kind of love her.
Surly?
Like matriarch. She's the matriarch, clearly. And then I have like the marriage photo. Come on for me, please. No,
it's wanting to focus on your sleeves. Yeah.
Focus. There is another kind of marriage couple, slightly different one. There we go.
And that would be really good to represent like mothers and fathers also, like as a couple, like in terms of decades, even multiples.
And then there is a gentleman by himself too. There we go.
He's
the
quite
single
dapper.
ones focus way better. The silver ones, maybe it was the silver, maybe it doesn't like the gold. And so there are 2 of each of those, and they're going to be going up on the store. But and here's the kicker: they come with a little extra. A little crispy extra.
Okay. A crispy extra. Yes, actually that works. So when I heard what Joy was doing, I loved the idea. I know it's a common blockage that people come up against. And so I thought, people might have trouble thinking of ways to work with it, or things to do with it, or how to work through things, or to start from there. And so I have made a special service just for this. That is a 1-hour service. It is an ancestral work mini mentorship. So it's basically like what someone would get in an ongoing, but it's like a 1 session. so that people can come in and they can, we can talk about specific issues or maybe ideas perhaps that would work with them in their personal practice in terms of using these or working with their ancestors along that line. And what I've done is I have given Joey an exclusive, nobody else has this, 50% off coupon, which is like something I rarely ever do, just for anyone who purchases those pendants.
And there's 8 of them.
Yes, there's 8 of them. It's limited. And then also it is up and available for those who do not have the code as well to purchase if you would like. But yeah, she's got a solid coupon, guys.
The Virgo has a solid coupon.
Solid
Who would have thunk it? So just to be super crystal clear, there will be 8 of these ancestry pendants going on starryeyedsupplies.com. If you purchase one of those floofs, you can't have a floof, I'm afraid, she's mine.
Yeah, no, don't purchase the floof.
You can't purchase the floof. Pictures maybe. But if you purchase one of the pendants, one of the 8 pendants, you will also receive a code from me. I will email it to you, or if you know me on Facebook, you can go, Joey, me, and I can look and say, oh yeah, you did. So here you go, here's the code, whichever. And that entitles you to 50% off Chris's tasty taster session on her ancestral.
And then you just go over to CrisAshburn.com, and on checkout, you enter the code and it'll take 50 off, 50%. Yeah. And so then you book right there on it with what's available.
Yeah. And I am going to put these up either tonight or tomorrow morning, probably tomorrow morning now because we're a bit later than we had anticipated. Yeah. So the lighting is no good for pictures right now. So I'll probably do that in the morning. So as of tomorrow morning, so more people have had a chance to watch the video too, which will also be on YouTube. You will be able to purchase one of these 8 pendants. Once they're gone, that's it. And once they're gone, all of those 8 codes are also gone.
Yep. That code will be gone as well. So
that will help you connect to ancestors in all sorts of cool ways. So there's like a physical product and a session as like a joint package.
Nice little Samhain combo.
Yeah.
For the lead up.
Yeah. We thought it was cool. We thought it might be fun. So thank you everybody for joining us on this live. I hope we answered all of your questions. If not, you can head on over to CrisAshburn.com, book a session if you like. You can buy a pendant and get half off a session.
No H in the name. CRIS.
CrisAshburn.com. And you can also pick up the meditations that I mentioned earlier, but the one that is it Bone and Dirt?
It is Root, Dirt, Bone, and Stone. It's a song, and I think it's $3.33 US, which is a very good deal. It's pretty powerful.
It's the best $3.33 you'll have ever spent if you want ancestor work.
All of my audio tracks are like channeled stuff.
They're all
behind
amazing.
Some of them, yeah, and some of them are just channeled vocals, and some of them have drum behind them, but. There's also a journey for Hell as well, if anyone is looking to work with the Norse goddess Hell. So yeah, but Root, Dirt, Bone, Stone is the audio that Joey was talking about.
And as always, you can find me, well, here, but also on www.starryeyedsupplies.com, where you can get all of your Halloweeny ancestral goodness. There is some new things coming tomorrow, and hopefully that will be the last of it because I need to finish it up and put it up. But there are things for the Forgotten Dead, which we mentioned earlier, smudges, candles, oils, anointing oils, all that good stuff. And I think that's it. I think I think that's the sales pitch at the end. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for the guys that said you like my wig. I felt like I needed to wear a wig today, so thank you so much for everything. You appreciate it. It's good to know. It's good to know. Thanks. I felt like being wiggy.
Getting wiggy with it.
We've said that so many times today.
So many times.
So many. So thank you guys for joining us. That's the end of the video.
Yes.
We have more joint videos on both of our YouTube channels if you want to check them out. We have talked about similar topics and topics that feed into
there's
this.
like 37 videos or something of just us together talking about things like this and like protection magic and like all kinds of other things. So if you like this dynamic, search Cris and Joey Fluxiness, the playlist, and it's all there.
Cool. So that's it. Thank you guys. See you again soon.
Yes.
Many blessings, everybody.
Bye guys. Love your face.